Hello and welcome to the Coach's Cup. I am Sonya Green from Sonya Green Coaching. And today I have with me Carla Moats, who is a financial coach. I'm going to let Carla tell you a little bit about who she is in just a second, but we're going to talk about how imposter syndrome affects women and their finances. So, welcome, Carla.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm really glad to be here. I
Tell
think
us a
this is
little
my
bit of.
second visit.
It is your second visit. That's right. That's right. When Shanna was on a few months ago, I said something about she was our first return guest. So I guess you're our second.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about what you do as far as your coaching niche.
I am a fractional CFO and a business coach. So some of my clients in the fractional CFO space, I work with just a small number of clients, and I basically serve as a part-time CFO. So these are for, typically clients that are 7 or 8 figures that are ready to step beyond their bookkeeper and need higher level finance and strategic advice. Which is available to big company CEOs and but small businesses don't need that much and they can't afford it. And so I come in on a fractional basis with them. And then I'm also a business coach. And I coach pretty much everything I'm doing. A lot of it's coming from a financial angle, but we're coaching on strategy. We're coaching on mindset. We're coaching on money beliefs. We are coaching on financial practices. But it's just that I'm coming at it from a financial angle. And really what I am trying to do is help business owners make more profit, have better cash flow, so that they can have businesses that support the life that they want to have.
Yeah.
So that's my thing.
Awesome. Well, I love this topic with looking at women with imposter syndrome because I see when I'm coaching women with imposter syndrome, I have seen it creep into their financial lives as well. So tell me where you see that happening.
I think it shows up in a lot of places for women. And I think whether you have a business, whether it's a side hustle or you're a full-time entrepreneur, or working, have a full-time day job, it shows up in both places. I think it shows
Mhm.
up in under earning, obviously.
Yes.
Like if I'm an entrepreneur, I'm not charging what I'm worth. If I had a dime for every conversation I have with entrepreneurs about the question, what should I charge? Or,
Mhm.
clients won't pay me for, don't want to pay this. If you're an employee, it comes in on the opposite side. I have a lot of friends in the recruiting industry, and they're like, more often than not, they said their women candidates don't negotiate. They
Yes.
said their male candidates always want to negotiate. They
Mhm.
said they don't care what the offer is. They're like, I'm always going to go back with a counter offer. But they said, usually that's a conversation they always have to have with women candidates is
Yeah.
about negotiation. They might ask for promotions. They might not go after promotions. There's a statistic I had read once that said that if a man sees a job, a job
Opening, yeah.
posting, if he has 30% of the qualifications, he'll apply.
Mhm.
For a woman, they often feel that they need to have 70% of the qualifications. So
Yeah,
that,
between 70 and 100.
yeah, you take two
Yeah.
you take two people with similar experience. That man is applying for that promotion when he has 30% of qualifications, because he knows he could grow into that role. The woman is waiting until she has 70%. So obviously, I think this also has, this plays into your, the gender gap we have out there. So
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, they're under earning. They're playing small. You play
Mhm.
small, whether it's in your business or in your career. Um, and we're often focused on our shortcomings and not on our wins.
Yeah.
And when we do that, again, it's like we're looking for reasons to substantiate, um, why we're not as
Or
awesome as the rest of the
yeah.
world thinks we are.
That's what I wanna go back to the negotiations for just a minute because I had a wonderful mentor in my PhD program, and my dissertation director, it was a woman, and she taught me to negotiate. When I went out on the job market, I negotiated. I negotiated for every position that I applied for after that, and I saw women coming in at all different, staff and faculty positions who had no sense of how to negotiate. They were scared to do it and nobody had ever taught them to do it.
Well, I think even when we go into the car dealership, I remember going into the car
Yeah.
dealership the first time to buy a car, and I was paying for the car on my own, and I brought my father in because I don't know much about cars,
Mhm.
and the whole time the salesman spoke to my father. I was
Yes.
like, "This is
Wouldn't
mine."
even look at you, right?
I have a good friend of mine who just bought a car, and she took her dad in to
Mhm.
negotiate. So I think so it may not even be negotiating for our salary, but it can be
That's a
negotiating
great point.
um, when we're buying a car, when we're buying a house.
Yeah,
And
any kind of
yeah, I
services.
think we're basically, kind of hardwired. This comes from, the patriarchy, how
Mhm.
we're raised, that, we don't want to rock the boat,
Mhm.
like, there's some people pleasing involved as well.
Yes.
And, we just want to be, we like to keep the peace. I mean, that often as moms, that's, for those of us that are moms, that's part of what we're doing is keeping the peace in the house, keeping
Mhm.
the peace in the family. And so, we just, we don't want to ruffle feathers. And so it's something that, we're just often not raised to do. And
Mhm.
so, um, you know, it's a skill you have to learn. But I think it starts with a mindset of knowing what you're worth, and
Yes.
not settling for less than what you're worth, whether it's in your business and what you charge for your services or your products,
Mhm.
or if it's in your day job, not settling for less than your value as an employee.
Yeah. So when you have women who come to you and ask you, "How much should I be charging?" What do you do? How do you
Well,
answer that question?
I do an exercise around, well, what is what you do worth? Because
Uh,
really the whole question of what price do I want to set always comes down to your belief in yourself.
yes.
What do you think? And even as an entrepreneur, I go through this myself, is, what is the value of what you do worth, and almost to take yourself out of it. So a lot of times, what I'll say is, how do your clients, your customers, how do they change? What result do they get? What impact does this have on their life? I say,
Mhm.
now let's assume somebody was selling this to you.
Yeah.
What's it worth? And usually when they can take themselves out of the equation, and I had a coach actually who asked me this, and I was like, well, it's priceless.
Yeah.
She's like, well,
Absolutely.
isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting?
Mhm.
So I think, because pricing is never about actually setting the price.
Yeah.
It's about what you believe your value to be.
Yeah.
And sometimes you step into it. You can raise your prices, gradually.
Mhm.
But same thing with your salary. I think when you're in corporate, you have a little bit of the idea of the value, because typically a job comes with a salary range, what you're
Right.
currently making. But it's, what are the results you're going to get for your company? And then why
Mhm.
are you the absolute best person to deliver that result?
Yeah.
I see too, what women often do too is, um, as I remember my days in corporate, you would, a job opportunity would come up, and maybe two or three other people you knew were also applying for the job, and you'd look around and you're like, God, but they've done XYZ and I haven't done XYZ. I guarantee you, um, the men in your
Don't
office
have that
are
conversation.
not sitting around.
Yeah.
If anything, they're sitting around and they're saying, well, yeah, I think the conversation is so different, because if they see a peer applying for a job, they're focused on all the ways that they're better than that person. Where
Yes.
for women, we're focused on all the ways that we're not as good as that person. That's classic, the classic imposter syndrome. So
Yeah.
it's, so,
I've
you know,
also seen women who didn't want to compete with their friends. They felt like they were somehow not being loyal if they threw their hat in there and competed with friends. And I think that is another sneaky way that imposter syndrome gets us because we're like, oh, I don't want this to be a competition. I might lose a friend. And
right. Yeah.
instead
That
you're
again, I think that's something that's fairly unique, to women.
yes.
And again, you know, men compete on teams against each other all the time.
Uh-huh.
And ultimately, when multiple women apply for the same jobs, they're helping other women because
Yes.
because even if you don't get the job, you're getting in front of the decision makers, you're getting your name known. So, not applying for something never really served, unless it's truly what you want. Maybe you don't want to apply for it because the job, requires 70% travel and you
Uh-huh.
don't want to. No, so when you don't apply for the job, I think the question you have to ask yourself is, why am I not applying? Am I not applying? I like the reason I'm not applying? Am I not
Mhm.
applying because I don't want to compete with other women? Because I don't think I'm as good as the other women, or am I, so am I doing it from a place of scarcity or a place of fear, or am I doing it from a place of, really intentional? This isn't the life I want. Maybe it's a leadership position that's going to have a significant number of employees reporting to you, and right now, you have a small team, and you really don't want to have to manage a larger group. So again, ask yourself, what are the reasons that you're not applying for that promotion, and where are they really coming from?
Yeah. Do I like those reasons?
Yeah.
That's great advice. So you were talking also about salary negotiations and how we will sometimes cut ourselves short in those salary negotiations simply because we don't value ourselves.
I think sometimes as women, when somebody offers us something, we feel like we have to take it. I think, it's
Oh,
like,
okay.
if,
Let's go with that.
like, I think, they've offered me this job, and we believe that, well, if I ask for more, then they'll tell me no, and they'll go hire another candidate. I'll lose out. Or they're going to think they're going to think negative things about me, or we're worried about the rejection. And if we're in a business, it's often, I hear women say, well, I made an offer to them for X dollars, and they came back and they wanted a discount, and I felt bad for them, and so I gave them the discount. So again, I think part of it is we don't have our own back, and we're worried about what the other person's gonna think. And we're coming at it from a point of scarcity, because if you apply for a job and you get an offer, and they want you,
Yeah.
in that role. And if we ask for more and they don't give it to us, there's one, you don't know unless you ask. The worst they're going to do is say no. And
Hmm.
two, let's just play, I like to play the worst case scenario. So the worst case
Yeah.
scenario, right, is that you ask, they say no, and they take the offer back, which, by the way, never happens, virtually never happens. But if they
Right.
do, if that person, if you want them for that role there,
Mhm.
you can find that role someplace else. It always is coming from a place of scarcity. I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
That's always coming from. And again, men aren't going into it, thinking that way. So I think, you have to, like, coach yourself when you come in, why am I worth that extra money? What are the results that I'm going to give for them? I think also too, for women, if the promotion already represents it, say the promotion already represents a 10 or 15%, pay increase, and they're like,
Mhm.
that's really generous, or that's all, it feels good. But it's more about, what is that role worth? What is all of my experience worth? What am I bringing to the job?
Mhm.
Uh, and it's not basically just accepting, exactly what they've offered, but negotiation is, it's definitely a skill
Mhm.
that I think most women aren't, we're not raised with, and it's something we have to go out and develop.
Well, and you'll also, I mean, companies want to get the best bargain they can for their money. So, especially if it's a promotion within the company, then sometimes they'll offer you that 10 or 15%, where if they were offering it to somebody else who's coming in from somewhere else or who was already making a higher salary, they would have offered more. So there's room there, and you're just so happy. That's what I see as women. They're like, "Oh, well, it was 10% more." Well, yeah, but what are you doing? Like, how much more time are you investing now?
One of the companies I used to work at, we used to have a joke that the best way to make more money at that company was to leave and come back.
Yeah, no, in
Because you
academia,
said
that's
earlier that
common.
companies want to make a bar. Well, your really good companies want highly engaged employees. They don't want to
Mhm.
overpay, but they want to have highly engaged employees. They want to properly reward their client, their
Yeah.
employee. But yeah, I had a company I used to work for, and that was our joke. In the
Yeah.
finance area, the best way to make more money was to work there for a year or two, leave, because we'd had several people who had left and come back. And when
Mhm.
they come, because as an outsider, typically often you're interviewing for multiple jobs. And
Yeah.
so that's the other thing too, is if you're applying for a job internally, you may be applying for other jobs internally, but a lot of times you're posting for just a particular role. Where if you are coming in from outside, you might be working with a recruiter, and you might be looking at 3 or 4 different opportunities. So you're kind of playing those opportunities off, against each other. But it's really just it all starts with your belief in yourself. So whenever somebody's
Mhm.
applying, I wish I'd known about imposter syndrome when I worked in corporate, because yeah, I think there's a lot of things you can do is, really step into, write your superpower, your superhero story before you go into that interview. Or before you go into that negotiation, everything, make a list of everything you've done to create the result where you are actually even in play, for
Mhm.
this, for this role. But I do think a lot of the gender gap has to do with the fact that, women, when we're taking new jobs, um, uh, we don't negotiate. We just take what's given to us. And if a man is, negotiating and getting, say, an extra 15%, well, over time, those numbers add up, and that contributes to, the gender gap that's out there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that I saw in academia a lot. You wouldn't necessarily leave and come back, but you go out, you interview, you get a job offer at another university, you bring that back to your
Well, and
university.
I mean, and what I meant with that is our company had we knew that when people applied for jobs, if they hired somebody outside due to the
Mhm.
competitive marketplace, the person from the outside was going to get an
Paid
offer for a
more.
higher amount than an
Yeah.
internal candidate.
Yeah.
It wasn't even that the experience was actually different. It's that they were hiring somebody from outside. That person from outside had multiple offers that they were perhaps leveraging, and that outside person, I could have 2 people, with the same experience level, but at the
Mhm.
company I was at, we knew, because people talk, is that the people that were coming in from outside with the same experience level were often making 10 or 15,000 more, or 10 or 15% more than the internal candidate,
Yeah.
just because of, because they were leveraging, multiple offers. And when you're leveraging multiple offers, you also tend to feel better about all the things you bring to the table.
Right.
There was often just a different mindset, because if I'm internal, it's like, well, yeah, but I don't want to. I don't want to have to deal with recruiters. I don't want to have to go
Mhm.
out and interview for multiple jobs. So we I don't know. We tend to kind of take what's given to us. Sometimes when I know at my company, it was like until you got to the upper levels, it was like, well, when you get a promotion, you get a standard 4% pay increase plus
Mhm.
a 3% promotional increase, 7%. The smart people realized that, yeah, that was in some policy book, but then they would go and say, well, I'm not taking on additional responsibility for
Right.
7% increase. I want another, X amount, per, or I want an extra, maybe part of your negotiation can also be your team, does the, what's it going to take for you to deliver the result that they want? Maybe your team needs to, be larger. Maybe there's a kind of infrastructure that you need to invest, because the negotiation doesn't just have to be about your
Yeah,
salary.
that's what I was getting ready to bring that up. So many times we think that the negotiation is just about a dollar figure. And many times that's part of it, of course, but there's other things that you can
I
negotiate as
mean,
well.
your negotiation can also be, I want, an extra week's vacation.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of companies have things that when you reach a certain level, different benefits kick in. So yeah, there can be a lot of different things that
Yeah. An extra
that-
admin or an
and
extra
again, the
team
worst
member like
thing,
you mentioned.
that happens is they say, no, we can't do that. And
Right.
most likelihood, you're not going to get exactly what you asked for, because I mean, hence of negotiation. What is it they say? For proper negotiation, both people should leave um,
Equally, uh,
equally disappointed.
yeah, yeah.
And so, if you're
As
not
an attorney, my
negotiating at
husband says that
all,
all the time.
yeah, yeah, if you're not negotiating at all, they're getting everything that
Yeah.
everything that they asked for. So it's just, I think the biggest thing is just not to take that initial offer as the best you can do.
Mhm.
And make sure that whatever you end up with is coming from, a solid belief in yourself, and being really comfortable in, what are all the things that you've done to get to this point, and focusing on everything you're bringing to the role. I think that's the other thing too, is, you know, women will often, um, talk, talk about, they'll lead with their flaws, or their
Yes.
critiques, the things that didn't go well, and they won't, and then they'll, or they'll put qualifiers on it. Yeah, I got this, I signed this big client, but men don't do that.
No.
Men always lead with the successes. Um, yeah, and I remember I worked being in finance. It was, it's gotten better, but it's still a
Mhm.
heavily male, especially corporate finance is heavily
Right.
male dominated. Remember sitting around tables with them, and I can't remember in all my years of corporate ever hearing a guy come in and lead with, you know
These are my
his,
flaws.
these are my flaws, these
Mhm.
are the things that I don't do well.
Yeah.
And know what your strengths are, and play to your strengths, because you can always manage around your flaws. That's the other thing too, is,
Mhm.
figure out what your strengths are, your zone of genius, manage to that zone of genius, and then, because you can always manage around, weaknesses, or your flaws, by building your team effectively.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about Zone of Genius. That comes from The Big Leap. But
Yeah,
for
it's
people who
one of
haven't
my
read that.
favorite. Yeah, one of my favorite books. It talks about your zone of competence, your zone of excellence, and your zone of genius, and how basically, people who are happy and engaged try and live 80% of their time in their zone of genius.
Yeah.
Um, and so your zone of, I may be butchering it a bit. Definitely go read the book. But basically, your zone of competence is something that you can do well, but there's a lot of other people out there who can do it at least as well, if not better than you.
Mhm.
Um, and so, in my space, I would say, like, that's bookkeeping. I can do bookkeeping, but there's a lot of people out there who can do bookkeeping as well.
Mhm.
It's a lot of people out there, and there's a lot of people out there who really love transactional bookkeeping. So that's my zone of competence. My zone of, then you have your zone of excellence, which is what you're better at this than probably 80% of the people out there, but you probably don't really enjoy it.
Yeah.
So for me, this is probably, like traditional accounting, technical accounting. I can do it. I'm better at it than 80% of the people. Taxes would be another one. I tell people when they ask me tax questions, it's like, I know more than you do. But I'm going to send you to somebody, when somebody asks me, I get asked all the time, do you do taxes? I was like, I can give you some general guidance, but when you're ready to do your tax return, or you're really ready to maximize your tax deductions, I'm going to send you to somebody who that's their zone of genius.
Yeah.
That's what they really are good at, and they do. And your zone of genius is that thing that you can do better than just about anybody else. It's where you thrive. For me, this is, like financial education, helping educate people,
Mhm.
helping them simplify their numbers, understand their numbers, and understand where strategy and finance intersect. Somebody told me the other day, told me the other day, they're like, "You're a financial whisperer. You're like, I never feel judged by you." And I can take things that are complicated, and I can simplify them. And
Mm.
a lot of your accounting people can't do that,
Yeah.
because they use a lot of accounting, lingo and jargon. And so the idea is to figure out what's your zone of genius, and spend 80% of your time in your zone of genius. It's a great book. Highly
Yeah. No,
recommend.
it is. I absolutely.
It's definitely, as I build my business, it's helped me. It's like, 'cause there's a lot of things I do as an entrepreneur. Some of them I do just because they have to get done right now,
Mhm.
but it's helped me get clear as to what are the very first things, that I want to outsource. If I take it into back into my corporate days, um, knowing your zone of genius allows you to figure out what kind of team do you need to have around you.
Mhm.
Um, because, another thing, if people haven't done, is Clifton Strengths test.
Uh-huh.
Um, um, Another thing, because I think that helps you find your zone of genius.
Yeah.
But figuring out what your inherent strengths are, and manage to those strengths, focus on those strengths. And then for the things that you're weaker in, you can use it to build your team, you can hire expertise, and I think there is a correlation between your strengths. I think the test is like $60 on the if you Google Clifton strengths, you'll find it. So like one of my strengths was strategic. And that happens to also be in my zone of genius.
Yeah.
So but yeah, you can manage, you can hire people to handle your zones of excellence and your zones of competence. And that's part of actually what I tend to do with a lot of my clients is they're kind of gotten buried in some of the day-to-day finances. They grow in their business, but they're just they've never put financial processes in place. And so, but now they're kind of sucked into it. So the very first thing I had a client not too long ago. It's like, your job is not to pay bills, to sit here and enter bills, and your job is not to send out invoices. It's like, that's not your job. You're this head of your business. Your zone of genius, which she knew, is sales, client relationships. Your job is to go out and make stuff happen. We need to find people, hire people, put structures in place so that areas that are your zone of competence, somebody else is doing for you. Yeah. So because your zone of competence is somebody else's zone of genius. That's the other thing to know is zone of competence doesn't mean that it's not important. Yeah. It just means it's an area that somebody else, it's their zone of genius. So
and with good leaders, they know that they don't have to be able to do everything, that they don't do everything well.
Right.
Yeah. And I think also sometimes women with imposter syndrome, they have trouble knowing what their zone of genius is because it's too easy to discount the things that they do. And so having the strengths test, I think, is good. Having a mentor or a good friend to talk to or a coach who can help you if you're having trouble and you're like, I don't have a zone of genius. I've had women tell me that.
Everybody has a zone of genius.
Everybody has one.
Sometimes the outside perspective, helps you get your zone of genius. But I also think as women too, sometimes it's hard. We feel like we need to be able to do it all.
Absolutely.
How often do we hear that as moms? I need to be able to do it all. I need to be able to go out. What was that old 1980s?
The Anjali.
I go out.
I bring home the bacon fried up in a pan. Never let you forget you're
what was that a commercial for?
Anjali perfume.
Yeah.
I use that in class.
I remember that from like 1980s or 1980s.
Yeah, early, it's about 19.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're expected to have the kids, stay home, make sure we nurture the kids, do our job. And to a certain degree, I mean, I love, working remote now. Yeah. But one of the things I've also found is people have to be really good at setting boundaries because it is very easy. It's like, I don't have to commute to work anymore. It's my computer's always there. Yeah. So set those boundaries, but we're expected to do it all. And we often feel guilty, even for hiring a, cleaning service or whatever, but it is, because you can apply this even within your home setting. What is your zone of genius? With your in your parenting role. Yeah. What is your zone of, genius? My zone of competence is not math. I have a daughter or chemistry, or helping with homework. And I found, there's other people. We have a tutor who's a lifesaver who, works with my daughter twice a week because my zone of competence is trying to help a teenager with understanding chemistry. I'm not even sure I'd call it a zone of competence, but her tutor, it's his zone of genius. He's really good at breaking down complex chemistry into simple pieces. So ask yourself in your personal life too, what is your what is your zone of genius in your relationships with your kids or your significant other. But so those are two that that's a book I would definitely recommend, is The Big Leap.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of my favorites. Well, I think we're about out of time today, but I'm going to have you back because we were going to talk about another book, and The Gap and the Gain, and talk about how that can affect financial situations with women with imposter syndrome. But Carla, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I always enjoy being here.
if they want to get in touch with you, how can people get in touch with you to talk to you about your financial?
They can check me out at www.carlamoats. That's CARLA, M as in Mary, OATS.com. That's my website. You can also find me on Facebook at Carla Moats Coaching, and you can find me on LinkedIn at just at Carla Moats. That's where I spend Facebook and LinkedIn is where I spend most of my my social media time. So
Awesome.
and they can grab a cash if they're have their own business. I just launched actually yesterday. Is what I forgot to mention it. I just launched a guide for 10 ways you can improve your cash flow in your business, and they can go grab that at my website.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll definitely be seeing you again in a few weeks.
All
And
right.
until
Thanks
then,
a lot.
all
Thanks for
right.
having me. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.